Older techniques become new and easier to do with today's products, and combining them creates even more card designing opportunities. Hello and welcome to Karen's Creative Cards on YouTube. I'm Karen Hashik, and years ago I played with the Bokeh technique and even wrote an article about it for a nationally published magazine. Bokeh is a photography term that describes the blurry, out-of-focus points of light portions of a photograph. The term bokeh is Japanese and it means a haze or blur. Many sources show the term pronounced either bokeh or bokeh. So because we can choose, I'm saying bokeh because it's easier. In the past, I've made my own stencil with circle punches and only used white pigment ink, as you can see here. I saved this from years ago, and I would just choose what size circle and make a card with it. But nowadays they have available layered bokeh stencils. I have this set of, it's actually 3 from Scrappiness, and I use this in almost all of the cards that I'm going to show today. It does all the design and the balancing and the decisions on where to put the circles for you, which makes it a lot easier, and I'll show you that when I make the card. And the Eclipse technique can be expanded to include shadow dies, as I have done here, not just alphabet dies, which was done in the past. So I'm combining those 2 techniques in all the cards that I'm sharing in this video. Bokeh for cards does not have to only be done with white pigment ink. This card shows both blue and white. So you can see the blue dots and the white dots. And then I double stenciled with a stencil from Gina K, and then I did the Eclipse technique with a die, a shadow die from Karen Berniston. Here's another one I did very, very similar. This is in purples. All the cards that I'm sharing today, of course, all the links to the blog posts will be in the description box, as well as the products that featured. And this is a sneak peek of a stencils technique class that I'm teaching in a local shop in February. So if you're in Wisconsin, check out the link in the description box. It will take you to the website where it's available, and you can call to register if you think you might want to take a stencil techniques class. Here's an example with no white pigment ink and bokeh dots of contrasting colors on a wood background, and this is featuring all Scrappiness dies, including her my favorite alphabet dies to do this technique is the Condensed UpperCase alpha dies. They're a little bit smaller than some of the really big individual letter dies, and I've used these on lots of these cards and lots of the Eclipse cards I've done through the years. Here's one I did with that same alphabet set from Scrappiness, and in this case the Bokeh stencil, layered stencil, is from Simon Says Stamp. So there are more on the market, or as I showed you, you can make it yourself. My favorite backgrounds for Bokeh Eclipse cards are created with watercolor powders, such as these made with Nouveau shimmer powders. The Eclipse technique can be used for objects as well as for words. As I show, this card features all Crealise dies, and the background was made with Nouveau shimmer powders, and when it dried I did a white pigment powder, white pigment ink on that through the stencils. Here's another one I made. This also started with the Nouveau shimmer powders, but then I made my bokeh circles with Nouveau glacier paste and with white shimmer cardstock. So you can experiment. Any sort of paste that you might have could be used. Give it a little texture, a little color, and then, you know, I was thinking about even using vellum, but I couldn't figure out how to attach it without something showing, so I didn't use vellum, but I just used a white shimmer. And then of course this is the Eclipse technique again. Now I decided that I wanted to the watercolor background to be brighter than those examples that I showed you. So I'm going to make one with Brusho crystal colors. Now you could use any of your watercolor powders. I showed you the Nuvo ones. I love the shimmer in those, but I decided I wanted it a little brighter. Color Burst would work, of course. Any of the watercolor powders that are on the market, or, you know, just your regular watercolor techniques too, you know, with inks or whatever. This is an old favorite of mine. This is Brusho Crystal Colors. They are, I have a link to them in the description box. It's from Colorcraft Ltd, but they are sold in the United States too. And two of my favorite colors to combine are the Ostwald Blue and Orange. I know that sounds a little weird, but this has, I'll show you, it has a really pretty combination of purples and blues and kind of a turquoise blue, and then the orange together is a really pretty combination. So the first thing I did was I took a piece of watercolor paper and I taped it down onto a mat. You don't have to tape it down, but I like to do that because that way when it's drying it's not warping and all the liquid draining to the sides. I can see that I forgot to get water paper handy to dry here. I like to do that, and then while it's drying it lays flat, but I still am going to soak up a little bit of the water before it dries. So I like to start with just a little spritz of water. You don't have to, but you can see then the colors already as they start to move with the water. And you can see that pretty combination of blues and purples there. And then I'm going to add a little orange. And then take the water and wet it. Move that up a little bit here. Now what I like to do is move it around. I don't like a lot of white space, but that is, you know, totally up to you. And I don't really like it when the powders are just sitting there. And then I just take a paper towel and go around the edges and soak up some of that excess liquid if it sits on the edge. But I always start with a piece of watercolor paper that's bigger than what I want to end up with. That way when I take the tape off, I can cut this down just a little bit, and it will have a nice edge to it. Now you can leave it like that, or let's say you want it a little bit brighter in some of the areas, you could add a little more. It's like a science experiment. Rarely do I end up with something that I don't like. And even if parts of this I decided I didn't like, I could just die cut something out of an area that I do really like. So it's just fun to play with. Then I move it somewhere and let it dry for a while. And then you can heat it with a heat gun to finish it. But if I heated it right now with a heat gun, it would move all that around, and you may want that look, or you may just want to kind of leave it the way it is. So I did one earlier with those same colors. You can see the oranges in there and the purples and the blues, and I cut it down to 4 by 5 1/4, and I've attached some temporary tape here as I am going to attach these stencils. So I'm going to start with 2 because that has the biggest circles in this Cat Scrappiness Layered Bokeh. And the reason I put that temporary tape there is I am going to use that. I'm going to decide where I want these circles and then use that tape to hold it in place. But I'm also going to take some other tape here and just tape that in place as well. I have a well-inked white pigment ink. This one happens to be Memories Unicorn, and you want it nice and juicy. And I have a sponge like this. You can use this. If you want to use a blending brush, make sure it's dedicated to this color only, because this pigment ink wouldn't mix well with others. And then I'm going to just add that white pigment ink. What I like to do is hit the big ones really bright, you know, a lot of ink, and then maybe a little lighter in some of the small ones, and you get, you know, that change in shades, I guess you could say. And then that first layer is done, and then if you take the number 1 stencil and you kind of line that up where you want it, and like I showed you before, you don't have to use white pigment ink, but when you've made a colorful background like this, I think the pigment ink is going to stand out the best. Again, I'm hitting the bigger ones a little brighter and then making the littler ones a little lighter, so you have different shades of the white. So take that temporary tape off. Our background is started. Another thing you can do is take an eraser on a pencil, and then if there's areas that you would like to add another dot or circle, you can do that. And what do you think? I usually put them in a series of 3, although there's quite a few small ones there. How about one more up here? And our bokeh background is complete. I'm going to hit that with a heat gun just to dry that pigment ink before moving on. I'll do it. Doesn't take long. I am going to make a bokeh. I'm sorry, an Eclipse. So So I was combining the Eclipse technique with the Bokeh technique on all of these cards. And what I'm going to do is cut out U, Y-O-U, with those letters from Cat Scrappiness. And I am going to make a Thinking of You card. So I have the Y-O-U cut out with fun foam that has stickiness in the back. I have an A2 card prepared with a navy blue card front that I'm going to put this on. So I will cut this in my die cutting machine, which has to be off camera because it's too big to be on. I had those letters taped to be sure that they were pretty much in a row and even. There's the U, there's the Y, and then the O, we need both this inside piece and this O piece. This is an older technique that's been around for years, and it's still one of my very favorites. I use it a lot, especially when you have a pretty colorful background. The background from there continues through the letters, but they're raised for dimension, and also the Eclipse is that there's a little bit of white from the fun foam that might show, or it depends on, oh, look at that. I just refilled this, and that was really watery to start. I refilled it after I cleaned it. Ooh, well, we're just going to have to fix that. That's a really good brand, and I use it all the time, but I'll have to check that out. So let's try. This one is Gina K Designs and her new fine tip bottle. So we're going to tape this on. I like to use the liquid glue because then you can maneuver it. I also have, and I'll show you, I've been using a lot, the Nuvo just came out with a fine tip bottle. With my weak wrist after breaking it, I have to use two hands on that, so I sometimes grab these other smaller bottles. So, alright, so then I'm going to take these foam adhesive letters that I die cut. This has a sticky back on it, so it goes right into the holes created here very easily. And of course, if you're using the word you, you could say celebrate you or thank you, or in this case I'm using thinking of you, and the thinking of was cut off from the U, and that's a Karen Berniston die. Oop, sticking to my fingers. You have to be kind of careful with these, because if you pull them too hard, they will stretch, and then they don't fit back into the holes. So you can see that little opening there. You want that same pattern to be in there. So I saved this piece, and I'm going to slide it back in and push it down, and then you can see the colors are in there continuing from the background. And then the same will be said for the letters, which again is just a favorite look of mine. Has been for years. But you can revisit older techniques and update them with newer products. You can see that little white shadow, which is why I think the name Eclipse came up with. And then the thinking of you cards are my favorite ones to make. Because you could be thinking of somebody on their birthday, but you could also be thinking of them if they're in the hospital. And in some cases it can serve as a sympathy card too. So it's a very versatile card to have on hand. Now, if you want, you could add some sequins or something. I have some clear gems from Cat Scrappiness that I like to use, and those show the color right through them. So they kind of look like blues and purples on there when you put them on. And maybe just 3 and kind of a triangular. It's not really triangular, but it's kind of 3 surrounding the U to bring a little emphasis to that. And there we have a lovely Thinking of You card with the Brusho pigment background with the Bokeh circles and the Eclipse way to do letters. I had great fun playing with older techniques with current products, and I hope my cards encourage you to give some of the techniques and products a try. Watch the next video for some more card making techniques you can try, and thanks for joining me today.